that the basis of pastoral care is to understand it as a ministry of presence. Being fully present to our patients is at the heart of our work. For most of us, believing and integrating this into our way of interacting, it's no small task. Since from our earliest years, we get signals that tell us to do. We're a productive society, and those who do not produce are looked upon as burdens. Production equals doing, which equals work, which equals money. So the mindset of pastoral care, which require that we be instead of do, is foreign for most of us and takes time to understand and fully integrate into our being. It's not that pastoral care is not productive or does not require energy. Indeed, effective pastoral care accomplishes much and can be very draining. However, it does demand an attitude of patient and compassionate being. I would say that this is where skill building begins. Becoming fully present to those we visit is what is important. It's not what we can do for them. It's what we can be to them.
A good indicator of how you might understand your role as a pastoral caregiver would be to pay attention to the way you make yourself available to it. I remember a beginning CPE student who would always ask, "Is there anything I can do for you?" Of course, this became an open invitation. And he was being asked to do everything possible, very little of which had anything at all to do with. Imagine the difference if he had asked, "How can I be?" Nothing else. It would certainly clue the patient into the fact that this pastoral caregiver was there for something other than making telephone calls or snack runs or doing things.
Remember that the basis of pastoral care is to understand it as a ministry of presence. Being fully present to our patients is at the heart of our work. For most of us, believing and integrating this into our way of interacting, it's no small task. Since from our earliest years, we get signals that tell us to do. We're a productive society, and those who do not produce are looked upon as burdens. Production equals doing, which equals work, which equals money. So the mindset of pastoral care, which require that we be instead of do, is foreign for most of us and takes time to understand and fully integrate into our being. It's not that pastoral care is not productive or does not require energy. Indeed, effective pastoral care accomplishes much and can be very draining. However, it does demand an attitude of patient and compassionate being. I would say that this is where skill building begins. Becoming fully present to those we visit is what is important. It's not what we can do for them. It's what we can be to them.
I'm Dave Middlebrook with the Church Law Group, and I want to spend a few minutes with you today talking about this important topic. I'm in this beautiful sanctuary here today, and sanctuary means to be a safe place, and we want the church to be a safe place for people to come and to share their issues and to receive pastoral assistance. However, because the word counseling has become generic, I mean, think about it. In our vocabulary, counseling is used in so many different ways. There's psychological counseling, psychiatric counseling, pastoral, ministerial, family counseling. I'm an attorney and I'm a counselor. So what does it mean to provide counseling services? If you don't understand what your role is as a counselor and you don't make it clear to those that you're counseling, it can ensnare you in a serious legal liability issue. So let's talk about some practical things that you can do at your church to help make sure that your role is clear and that you have the best policies and procedures in place to make sure your church is a safe place and that you can provide that important role of pastoral counseling. I like to call it the 4 R's. First of all, number 1 is review. You need to review the law in your jurisdiction. You need to understand what the role is of a pastoral counselor and how it's different from the many other roles of counselors in your community and in your state. 2, you need to have a release, what I like to call a ministerial counseling acknowledgement form. That's a form that you have counselees sign before you begin to provide counseling services that clarifies what you will be doing as a counselor and what you will not be doing. It defines the relationship. That way, if it ever gets broken in any way, you can point back to that document and say, I always said I was merely going to provide you ministerial counseling. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. Third, you should review and then you should share that information with your staff by allowing them to understand the rules as it relates to counseling. Then they'll be better equipped to make sure they don't find themselves in an improper situation. You should react should there be a claim or charge brought against anyone in your church so that that doesn't lay fallow, it doesn't fester, and it doesn't result in what can become a serious lawsuit. And then finally, you should retain. You should retain qualified legal counsel that can help you develop the policies and procedures that will help protect you and your church staff and all of those in your organization that are providing counseling services to your congregation or to your community. I hope this information today has been helpful and informative. If you have more questions about this important topic, you can contact us at churchlawgroup.com. On our website, you'll find information about this topic and many other important topics related to your practice as a minister, your ministry in your church.
Wow. Well, the obvious, I guess, disconnect there is, are we going to solve the huge global problems we have with simply the individual, dealing with the individual? And I think it's a good starter question. I do think there have to be some intermediate gifts. In other words, the spiritual direction is very much the enlightening, the freeing, the liberating of the individual soul. It isn't meant to be corporate work, although sometimes I've loved to say that when I'm teaching well, I feel like I'm doing group spiritual direction. So sometimes it can be a group work. But hopefully you would be liberating people with gifts for organization, management, journalism, who are going to influence the corporate level too. But it does have to go to that level. We can't think that just by liberating this person, this person, this person, if we don't get those people working together, it's not going to move to the tremendous social problems we're facing today. But it still starts there. You know, if we don't have liberated, enlivened, aware journalists, for example, isn't going to make a great deal of difference. They've got to have a passion for both. Our center in New Mexico, where I'm from, is called the Center for Action and Contemplation. We're almost 21 years old now. And looking at the pattern of 21 years of the people who come for our internship programs, our conferences, invariably, by personality, by temperament, we all have a bias. And that's okay. There are the inner people, if you can call them that, and there's the outer people who are engaged in action, change, and they both have their own set of limitations and their own set of gifts. We've often said that the most important word in our title is not action, it's not contemplation, it's and. And I'm amazed how much work that is, because the activists, the doers, the change agents have to be stretched to say this has got to come from an inner foundation and not just outer anger. And just as equally, there's a lot of inner people, especially if you were raised as a Christian, that you idealize prayer, spirituality, devotions, which sounds like the higher way. But I know now it's also a place to hide. And I can see why people like John Cashin spoke of pseudo-contemplation, you know, that the word contemplation can inflate the ego, make you think that you are on a higher level, when in fact you have not stretched to feel the pain of the world and the immense suffering of our world. So we both have to stretch. You know, the hope for me, and I hope I can talk about this with the group, is that up to now, and I think we reflected history, that looked up to higher-ups, people with special costumes and special titles and special degrees and what we called in the church ordination. What's happening now, and we're seeing this even in our politics, that it's not enough to hold an office. You've got to have competence. America now is just, begging for competence. And I think the same thing is happening in the church. And I don't mean any disrespect by that. I'm a priest myself. But I think we now know, just to be honest, you can be an ordained priest, you can be an educated minister, and not really be competent to understand the human soul, how change happens, how people grow, how grace is communicated, is a very different skill set than simply saying, I'm ordained. So I think it's a real sign of advancement that we can expect what we call, interesting enough, lay people. Right? And the very word defining, people who don't know, people who aren't very competent. And this is the great turnaround that's happening, that we're finding, you know what? Some of the lay people have the competence without formal ordination. So it's going to be lay-led. And it's in a position where it doesn't have to fight the structures of the church either. It moves purely by competence. Purely. Now I know they're not going to get rich, unfortunately. Competence doesn't seem to get you rich, unfortunately. So, anyway. Well, your own T.S. Eliot from England, he says, Lord, teach us to care and not to care. I love that line. And I'd say it in regard to the discernment of any vocation. You have to have a passion for it. It has to have a place that fits in your heart already, which is the way the Holy Spirit speaks, to say, I'm calling you to this. I name it within you as a desire. But then I don't think you can care too much. You understand? We always say, people who need to be ordained too much, don't ordain them for a while. Well, I'd apply that to a certain degree, not as much, because spiritual direction is not an office with all kind of perks, as ordination was. But I'd still say that if you need the label too much, the title too much, the self-image too much, if you be pushing too hard, I'm a spiritual director and I want to be recognized, then I would delay that person's validation as a spiritual director. So, Lord, teach us to care and simultaneously not to care. Yeah. Now, did I connect it with world peace, which I'm very glad you are connecting. Thank you for doing that. Again, if you have obsessive people, needy people, people who need the role and the title too much, or the power, if there's that much power with it. There really is, but not what the world calls power. That always sets you up for aggressive, violent relationships, eventually. I don't know how long it'll take, but if you need it too much, you're going to fight to protect it. You're going to manipulate to protect it. You're going to be deceitful to protect it. There you have the foundation of unpeace, non-peace, violence. Maybe it's low-level violence, but that's where it all starts. And we've seen it inside of our churches, where everybody's aggressively competing, fighting one another. Well, that organization is not going to be a place that is going to understand nonviolent anything. Yeah. It can't be a peacemaking church.
Yeah, I'm Will Hernandez, and I make my home in Arcadia, California, which is in Southern California, near LA. In fact, we're under LA County. And right now, in terms of faith tradition, faith community that I belong in, I am really right now just trying to find my new community. But I would consider myself, ecumenical Christian with evangelical rootedness and all that. I think the one word that I would associate with spiritual direction is the concept of companioning. In fact, I would probably prefer to use a one-with-one type relationship as opposed to just merely one-on-one type relationship. And I know that that sounds very simple, companioning and all that, but to me, it's very profound because you're companioning a soul, so it involves deep soul work, which I believe is spiritual work because you're dealing with a soul who's made in the image of God, So I love the way Alan Jones, who's the dean of Grace Cathedral, who's written some books also on spiritual direction and all that. I love the way he describes the whole companioning idea. He says, companionship was for the hatching of the heart, the bringing home of our scattered, fragmented selves, and the making of a heart at home with itself. Now, I know that I'm not about to wrangle over terminologies right now, but I would dare say, you can speak of the heart, the soul, the self, rather interchangeably, the way, Augustine used the term. And so I believe that spiritual direction goes very deep in the sense that you're taking aim at the soul, taking aim at the heart, or the self, the true self made in the image of God. And I love what he says, that it's the bringing home of the scattered self, which in the words of Sue Monk Kidd is the deepest meaning of spiritual becoming, where the spiritual journey is likened to our transformational journey of coming home to who we really are, our true self. So yeah, I appreciate the fact that spiritual direction is focused on the individual, the being made in the image of God, which, if I may borrow the words of my former mentor before, he says, in reference to the imago Dei in every human being, that resides in every human being, he or she represents a valuable being. So hey, what greater work can you think of than actually dealing with a soul made in the image of God? So. I would say if there's one quote unquote qualification for somebody who would go for spiritual direction, it's probably just a seeker, a spiritual seeker. I wouldn't come up with a whole elaborate checklist of requirements as who can qualify to, go seek spiritual direction. But I've had, the privilege of actually coming alongside people who do not even profess a particular faith, but they're genuinely, authentically seeking, and that to me is more than enough, kind of like motivation for somebody to come for spiritual direction. But of course, there's something to be said about, people who are seeking direction just because, not that they have problems or that they are in the thick of phase in their life when they're seeking certain, solution or whatever to a particular conflict, problem, or whatever, but just somebody who's wanting to deepen their relationship with God, and who's open to being companioned by somebody in their, on their particular journey. And so, and also, some people go for spiritual direction, of course, who are specifically, in discernment, whether it be vocational discernment or just lifestyle issues, that they want to be just companioned by somebody who can at least facilitate some clarity in their lives, and all that. So. Yeah, I guess, like I said earlier, I don't think that there really is a hard and fast rule or qualification for somebody to engage. They may not know the techniques or methods or of prayer, but if in their hearts they're genuinely wanting to connect with God, well, that qualifies them to profit from the experience and all that. And the process itself, actually, it can entail, in a sense, the learning of those kinds of practices and disciplines. I've had people who started out with me in spiritual direction, but they're not even familiar with certain spiritual practices, examine or centering prayer and all that. But spiritual direction became for them a learning kind of like venue for them to actually engage in the practice while doing direction. It's not as though it's like, okay, I'll give you a homework type thing, but in the direction, in the process of direction itself, they're engaging with me, in the experience, and that's awesome, because then they come out really profiting from the experience itself.
Spiritual care helps us respond to our call to care for the whole person, body, mind, and spirit.
Spiritual care is truly embedded in the whole fabric of St. Mary Medical Center, from our colleagues to our patients, to their families, to our physicians and our volunteers. The difference that spiritual care makes is truly brings to life our healing ministry of body, mind, and spirit care for everyone, no matter who they are at St. Mary. Spiritual care makes a difference truly in their lives.
I have seen the value of chaplains in many ways. For example, I have been at the bedside of a dying patient when they have held their hand and prayed for them. It has brought great comfort and consolation to the patient and family.
We utilize the spiritual care department very frequently. It is important not only for our patients, but for our patients' families. We all like to treat patients and have them get better, but there are times when the patients don't get better, and this is when the spiritual care department is essential in counseling the families when the patients aren't doing well.
I love the people here, I love the leaders here, and I love the fact that we are serving people in a manner that is above anything that I've experienced elsewhere. We view each person as a sacred human living being, and they were created by God, and we aspire to take care of each person based on their individual needs, not only physical needs, but mental and spiritual needs as well.
I think pastoral care and chaplaincy is a very valuable part of the overall holistic management of the patient, because many of these patients, as you know, have life-threatening diseases and when you're diagnosed with cancer, it brings home the whole idea of one's mortality, and prompts an examination of one's purpose and meaning. And I think that in managing these patients, one has to address the needs other than the physical, that is the psychosocial, the emotional and the spiritual needs of those patients. I think that pastoral care is actually integral to any faith-based organization, and particularly in the Catholic environment, it's vital to our mission.
Whether it be a hug, or when I bring them to Mass and put their shawls around them because they're so cold, I always put them around their neck and they go, and they laugh. To me, that's making a connection. To me, that's the presence of God. When they ask me about God, a prayer, what have you, I always do it. But most of the residents I work with, they just want to be known that they're cared for and that there's someone there to spend some time with them. And I think that's my role as spiritual caregiver.
Sally is just exceptional when it comes to taking care of the spiritual needs of the patients. Not only the patients, she's very supportive to the staff, the physicians, the nurses and employees of St. Peter's Hospital.
I actually met Sally when I took care of her husband many years ago. We became good friends then, and she took care of us when I took care of her. She continues to take care of the staff, as Alice already said. My relationship with Sally is that usually if I know a patient is going to have a bad diagnosis or is having a difficult time, I'll tell Sally, just go do a la-di-da. And Sally knows that means just go with a piece of paper and pretend like she's just going to go in and introduce herself as a chaplain, and she gets this great relationship with the patient, and then later on she's a friendly face when they do get that bad diagnosis. And she, as Alice said, always knows the right thing to say at the right time.
In hospitals and healthcare systems throughout the country, the focus is typically medical care. In Catholic healthcare, we focus on the spiritual needs as well as the medical care. That's what makes us different. Our pastoral care departments do a tremendous job at ensuring that we meet the spiritual needs of our patients. The pastoral care department is an essential element and at the center of what we represent in Catholic healthcare. It is so important for us to recognize those in the pastoral care departments for allowing us to fulfill our mission as a healing presence in the communities that we serve.
The spiritual care department are such important members of our team. And we always talk about what is so special about Holy Cross, and I believe it's our spirituality. And the spiritual care department are like our anchors, especially in stressful times. I remember one day in a code situation, we were working with the team, with the patient, and unfortunately the patient did not make it. So we started to end the code, and everybody started to walk away from the bed, and in that moment, our spiritual care pastor stopped and said to everyone, why don't we all just gather around the patient's bed? And we brought in the family, and we took a few moments to honor this patient's life. The spiritual care department reminds us each and every day of what our mission is, and that is to create a healing environment for our patients, their families, and for each other. They remind us of our mission, and that is to serve with Christ-like compassion.
My first main interaction was with Chaplain Carl. I remember initially when I started here, not too long afterwards, I lost my parents within a month's time, and he was there, wasn't expecting it, but he was there to give some comfort, not only here, but with my family. So that left a good feeling in my heart. So I carried that. Eventually, I started interacting with our volunteers and in dealing with their personal lives. They bring that peace with them. We become their extended family. And so their problems become ours. And we do this unconditionally. I think chaplain services is an unconditional profession. You're not looking for gratitude. You're there to help. And that's what our volunteers give us. They're here to help.
We had a patient that our chaplain, Molly Garnett, followed for many, many weeks, who was a little preemie baby with congenital heart disease, and she ended up, in the end, passing away. And at the end, the parents felt that they didn't really have any one particular person that they wanted to do the funeral except Molly. And they had felt that Molly had such an integral part in taking care of them as well as their daughter during her hospital stay that they asked her to do the funeral service for them. And I think that was very special and very, very important.
Pastoral care is a team effort where we work together with the doctors and the nurses and the other caregivers to minister to our patients in their spiritual and physical needs, to help them as they work through this crisis, to know that they're not alone.
I remember one time I was working with one 92-year-old woman who was dying, and she was afraid of death, and she was in bed, and she turned to me and she said, "Deacon Bob, teach me how to die." And it was a very, very moving experience, and I talked to her a little bit and explained to her that God never abandons her and that God is with her always, and just a very moving experience and a very wonderful experience to be able to do that and to hold a person's hand, to let them know that things are going to be okay.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I hope I can do it for many more years to come. I love being here at Holy Cross. I feel very blessed, and I feel a lot of guidance from the chaplains. They give us a lot of guidance and help, and if we need anything or anything has taken place, we just tell them and they just take care of everything for us.
At a time when you're a patient in the hospital, it's really, really important to be able to have someone come in and just pray with you if that's what you want, hold your hand if that's what you want, listen, just be one with.
I've been fortunate to be with the Sisters of Mercy, chaplains, pastors, and the wonderful priests who have been part of my care with all my patients. They've been wonderful to the patients. More importantly, as a physician, they've been there to hold us up when there are times of hardship. And I thank every day how they can change the outlook of a patient even when difficult things come, to be providing the comfort. Almost like the mission statement says, Christ-like compassion for all the faith.
The spiritual care here is extremely helpful. This year has been a hard year. Starting off in February, I lost my husband, and we've had 4 deaths in our family since then in the past 6 months. And Sister Barbara and the rest of the team have been really, really great, making sure that I'm okay and just making sure the family's okay. So I've been really well with the spiritual care here at St. Mary's.
Mission services provide so much to our patients and to our staff here. They're kind of the glue that makes everything kind of congeal together for us. They offer the patients prayer and support during difficult times. We have patients that range from just coming in for a screening to getting devastating news that's life-changing. Without the chaplains and the sisters for support, I'm not sure how we as nurses could do our jobs. A piece of the puzzle would be missing in order to care for our patients.
Tabitha is one of the new chaplains, and we had a code in CCU one night. Very large family, unable to understand that this person was really going to die no matter what we did. And we continued to code the person until they died. And then Tabitha sat down with the family, and the wife just fell into her arms sobbing. And Tabitha sat rocking her for about 20 minutes until she could begin to accept that her husband really had died. I've also seen some really beautiful, touching moments too. I came around the admitting office one morning, and there was a very pregnant young lady going to come in for a C-section, and Father Muniz had his hand on her abdomen, one hand on her belly, one hand on her head, and was blessing her before the C-section, which was one of the most touching moments I think I've seen here at the hospital.
Pastoral counseling is mental health counseling with a spiritual emphasis or perspective. So if clients want to talk about spiritual matters, the pastoral counselor is well trained to help bring up those topics of conversation. We seek to be spiritually sensitive to the client's point of view, not to invite clients into our way of thinking, but really support them on their journey of what might be troubling them. All counselors are trained to work with a variety of different clients. And the pastoral counselors really bring in a spiritual perspective into the room if that's what the clients seek. Many times pastoral counseling and counseling will look really similar if a client doesn't find having spiritually oriented conversations helpful. And pastoral counselors are well trained to have conversations that respect the client's own sense of spirituality and religion. We train our students to be clinically competent and spiritually sensitive, so the students take courses in theology. They also take courses in counseling skills to learn empathy and counseling theory. And then the students also do a year-long practicum experience where they're working in different mental health settings, practicing the skills that they've learned in the theological classes and the clinical classes. Our students look forward to becoming licensed mental health counselors in the state of Washington, and our program helps prepare them for the coursework attached to the licensure. And I think you'll find that our classes prepare you for licensure in many states, although there might be some additional requirements depending on the state where you seek your licensure. Many of our students become licensed mental health counselors if they work in agency settings, so they could work maybe in a hospital, inpatient or outpatient mental health clinic. They could work with other clinicians in a group practice, seeing clients from the community. They could work in community treatment centers, thinking about issues such as substance abuse or marginalized population. Some of our students decide to set up a private practice, and it might be in a place of worship, or it could be in an office.